And this show, as you can, if you know Robert Capa, is not a very typical show of his work. He is best known for his black and white photographs of the great historical events of the mid-20th century. He photographed in Spain and was one of the three most important international photojournalists making photographs in Spain. He photographed in World War II and was best well known as for that brilliant D-Day series of photographs that he made in June 6, 1944. But almost no one knew that he photographed extensively in color, a little bit in World War II, and then heavily after the war until his death in 1954. Color film was invented in 1936. That was the first 35mm roll film. I think it had just followed the advent of color motion picture film. So 1938, while he was traveling in China, he was traveling with another Swiss photographer who had color film and was shooting color, and he was very interested and excited about that. And he wrote to his brother, Cornel Capa, saying, please send me 12 rolls of color film. I have some great ideas for it. And unfortunately, we do not have any of the actual film from that time, but Life did publish 4 photographs in color by Robert Capa. And then you can see in that vitrine over there, the Life, 2 of the photographs. 2 were published on the other side. And just so you know, technically, color was very expensive to publish at that time. And you can see there's a different shiny paper. So the magazines were interested in color, but they had to use it very judiciously because it was more expensive, but also because the processing was quite different than black and white. Black and white, a photographer could develop it in their own darkroom that evening, edit it and get it off to the papers the next day if they were really organized. Color film, the Kodachrome color film, had to be sent off to Kodak developing plant, which had limited developing plants in different countries. In fact, I believe there was one in London and one in France and maybe one in Germany, but really in Europe there were very few plants. So it was not, and so that process, sending it away, then processing and then sending back was at least a 2-week lag time. So it was really not the best medium for fast news reporting. Nevertheless, Capa remained interested in the film. And so in 1941, after the end of the Spanish Civil War, and he escaped to New York and was starting to work with the magazines there, he was very aware of the action in Europe, of the beginning of the war, and really wanted to get back to war reporting. That was the territory that he was most comfortable with. He didn't really love going out to the Midwest of the United States and photographing county fairs. And so he convinced an editor to send him to London on a boat, and he would send back both black and white and color film. So this is his first attempt at a real color story. And these are photographs both of the crossing over the Atlantic on a convoy, and as well as a field over England where British bombers were going out and doing raids in Germany and then in the north of France. And then in this particularly exciting moment, actually had crash landed because their wing was malfunctioning and sort of chemical had to be sprayed so it wouldn't explode right there. It was published in color, but as you can see, the color sort of off. It's not quite the color that we know and love, and he knew that then. He was not very happy with the English processing. Nevertheless, he came back to New York, sort of did the same thing with another editor for Collier's magazine, convincing them to give him an advance for his trip back to London, where he could make more stories of the war. And he also brings this time not just a 35mm camera, but uses a speed graphic camera, which uses a larger negative, middle-sized negative. So you see there's all of a sudden we can not only print these larger, but there's incredible detail here. And I think you can really see him starting to use color for full effect. and I think even a sort of a Hollywood sensibility to what color can give to his images. So these are on the crossing. In 1943, he moves with British soldiers to North Africa, which is where the Allies are starting to bring in all the material to load up for the invasion of Europe, and is now really starting to get more and more engaged with as a war photographer at that point. And I think from 1943 until the end of the war, he doesn't go back to New York. And I think these are quite spectacular photographs of the boat from London to Casablanca, and really, the composition here of the square in the square with her rectangle within the rectangle, and these beautiful shadows of the boxers, and then just the hint of color that make the image come to life, as well as the British soldiers writing quietly at various moments during the ship, and then even this. Again, just to talk about composition seems such an anathema to Robert Capa, because so much of his great work is really about history and content and story. But you can't avoid also recognizing that he had a beautiful sensibility to see sort of the squiggles of the boat, and then the wind blowing through the hair of this one soldier. But what I also think is so interesting to look at, particularly these World War II photographs, is that there was so little color photography from World War II that we know well. It wasn't published very often at the time, and so little of it has surfaced. There is some work that's starting to surface, but it's a world that really, obviously was fought in color, and I think with these color photographs, we can know more about that period, because color is really information. And it's sort of incredible to see this world sort of brought to life in color. A big part of this exhibition is in the vitrine, so when you have time later to go back quietly and look at some of the magazines where you see his work, and then also the letters, most of which he wrote to his editors, but this is a wonderful letter that he wrote to his brother, Cornell Capa, who was living in New York, and this is in 1941. So this is, right after he took those pictures, and, among he talks about his work, and he's working on a book that he's doing on London, but then later on he talks about the work that he's doing. He did 64 color Kodachromes. Half of it is badly developed, but I am a great photographer, and I hope they will print it. So you really get a flavor for his sense of confidence, and really, his sense that he, desire, all constant pushing to get his work published. And here are his handwritten notes on the back of another letter to his brother, and he just details his various stories that he's sending over. Here we have another magazine where you can see some of the pictures there, very similar moments, but in black and white. So this British magazine chose only to publish the black and white pictures of the same story, and I think partly for financial reasons. It was very expensive to use the color, and they felt that the black and white told the story well enough. The rest of this wall during World War II is from North Africa, where he goes right before he moves into Italy for the invasion in the end of 1943. And again, you can see some of the extraordinary pictures are taken with this big speed graphic camera, which produces this big negatives. And again, this very theatrical quality to some of the images. And I think there's a real sense of, pride, of these soldiers, of these officers, but also a great sense of mortality too, in what is actually happening. Even if it's a German grave, he's documenting this Nazi cemetery in North Africa. That is all from 1943, and then from 1943 until the end of the war, there's no color photography at all. I think he really just dropped color because he was having such a hard time getting it published, and also because of the time delay, and he probably couldn't even, and because he was out in Italy, he couldn't even get that much color film. So I think, despite these fantastic beginnings of color work, he's arguably decides to just work in black and white, to great effect. But he picks it up really the post-war period. But before then, just quickly, these great photographs of Hemingway, the writer who he met in Spain. And this was a story that he did for Life magazine because they were profiling various celebrities. Another time where Life decides to publish just the black and white photographs that are very similar pictures. But he was very proud of them, and there's a letter in that second vitrine where he talks about how pleased he is with the American Kodachrome processing, which he finds far superior to the English Kodachrome processing. And he's sending this to an editor, hoping that the editor will see, oh, look how great my color photographs are, would you like to publish them? So they're just, Capa was someone not who, quietly, passively took assignments, but he was very heavily engaged with the work with his editors, as with John Morris, who was the photo editor for this story in Ladies' Home Journal. He went to the Soviet Union in 1947. It was a trip he had wanted to take since the 30s. He wanted a visa in 1937 and 1938. I think in 1941, when he was debating whether he should go back to London or to Soviet Union, but he was never able to get a visa. So he finally got a visa in 47, really to go with John Steinbeck, the great sort of workers writer, and really discover for themselves what life was like for the average Soviet person. What was behind that Iron Curtain? And these are some of the photographs that he took during this trip. And there was a great technical shift at this point after the war. You can see these are all square format. This is from a rolling camera, which is, you look down and out. And this was used with this new Ektachrome film that was available after the war. And it was a much easier film to use because you didn't have to send it to Kodak, to the Kodak processing plant, and you could send it to different color, not the color pharmacy, but color development stores. Anyone could get the big machine and get it processed. So it was much faster, obviously, and easier to get out. So it was great. It was the sort of the film of the magazine photographers of the day. And obviously, also because it is a bigger negative, you could crop it to horizontal or vertical. So there was a lot of negative detail to play with. So that's why it became so popular. But, and this was one of the great challenges of this exhibition, and why so much of this color work has never been seen until now, is that Ektachrome is very sensitive to light, and almost all of the Ektachrome faded. Blues very heavily, and then almost every color. So they were in terrible condition when we first looked at them, and to the point where you could have never printed them in a normal darkroom. But with the digital technology, we're able to scan the film and then slowly, carefully color correct the image to get back to what it more or less looked like at the time that it was printed. So that was done with working very carefully with machine printers, who were really just kind of brilliant in trying to match magazines. In one case, from a film set, we actually watched the film to look for colors. We look for, starting with the sky, you start with blue and blacks and whites, and if you know digital photography, yeah, you can see how colors start to fall in. So in this vitrine, there's a great, actually a speech that he gave in 1947 after he came back with John Steinbeck, and his first line is, I am a photographer and I have an enormous accent, which is of course his great Hungarian accent in the United States. But it goes on to talk about what they were doing in the Soviet Union. And what's also interesting, at the end of the film, at the end of the exhibition, there are two headphones, and that is a recording of the only recorded moment of him speaking. He somehow escaped television and any other radio recording in his life, except for this one recording that was actually recently found on eBay, because all of the recordings of this radio interview following their trip from to the Soviet Union were lost and destroyed, and no archives had it. Even if they had an indication that they would have had it in their archives, it was just gone, and somehow it landed in a sale in Western Massachusetts a few years ago. So you can hear his voice talking about a little bit from World War II and a little from Soviet Union, a little bit from the Spanish Civil War. So it's about 20 minutes of him speaking, which is fabulous. Just what I, of course, mentioned his trip from 1948 to Budapest. He, at the end of his trip to the Soviet Union with John Steinbeck, he came for, I think, like 24 hours, two days maybe, to visit his niece here. And then he proposed a trip to Holiday magazine the next year. Holiday magazine was a post-war magazine, big, glossy travel magazine. It was really sort of an American magazine for people to dream about different places. Every month they focused on 3 or 4 different places to visit, some American, but most international. And this was an amazing assignment, because not only did he take the pictures, but he wrote the story to it. He was a born storyteller, and the text is very charming, actually, and interesting, and that's reproduced in the catalog, which again is in the back in the reading room, where all of the letters are translated from the English to the Hungarian. But it's a bittersweet trip for him, I think, obviously, to Budapest, because he's seen so much that's changed, and so much of his family is, there's no family left other than his sister-in-law and his niece. And he never returns to Hungary for the rest of his life. But where he visits in 1948 for the first time, he goes to photograph the War of Independence, and really stays very quickly, because he's actually shot in the leg. But there's one color photograph from that whole trip. See the first photograph there. But then he returns in 49 and 1950, again, to look at this new country. He's really interested in the immigrants. I mean, obviously, as an immigrant himself, and so affected by the rise of Nazi power and the depletion of Jews across Europe, he's really curious on how this new nation is going to build itself with all these people from different countries with so many different cultural traditions sort of smashing up together. He even makes a film, too, which is odd. But anyway, so those are these photographs from Israel. They were published, of course, in Holiday magazine with not a text by him, and several other publications. At that time, he also does a story in Norway for Holiday magazine. But one of his great color stories, I think, a story that really works better in color than black and white, is a story on the European, French, Swiss, and Austrian ski resorts. I'm quite sure he learned to ski in Hungary, because I know he went skiing right away when he arrived in New York and wrote a note to his brother saying, "Please send me my ski boots." So it's clear that that was a story he really loved. But it's obviously, to photograph a white mountain with little black skiers is not very interesting black and white. And in color, the blue skies and the crazy, the fashion outfits people are wearing really come to life. And it's also a very aristocratic, upper-class world in these ski resorts. And I think there's something that's so dramatically shifted in this post-war period for him. I mean, he's really interested in healthy, happy, playful characters, really without any reference to Europe 5 years earlier. In these pictures, except for one. You can see the one, the group of 4 on the top left. You see these, adorable little Austrian girls, but then there's a soldier there with one leg. Just the smallest memory of what had happened years before. But he's having lunch with the Prince of Norway. This beautiful Chilean girl. This girl from New York he meets and travels around, and she's his model for much of his photographs. he attempted a little bit of fashion in the post-war period. He thought, I think it was going to be a good source of income for him, but he wasn't very good with a group of people. He really was more of an independent photographer. He wanted to go where he wanted to go. He wanted to do the shots how he wanted to do shots. He wasn't going to wait for a hair and makeup person. But I think he had a great sense of style and fashion. His mother was actually a tailor, so that was deep in his blood. But clearly he had a lot of fun setting up the Matterhorn mountain in the reflections of her glasses, which I think was reproduced in one of the magazines at the time. But it was a big story, and again, there's a letter there, and he's writing to his editor at Holiday, and he says, the story is good, you will like it, and the color pictures are excellent. So in this case, I think he was really excited about the color work. If maybe he'd really gotten it together, or sort of melded content with technique in this case. He photographed Picasso. In 1948, he goes down to his new studio in the south of France. Again, a story that he told the editors and convinced the editors to do. And it was a situation where the editors didn't like the color at all. They said so in various letters and only published the black and white. But I think what's interesting today is to see the color photographs of Picasso, particularly holding his son in the water, has become one of the favorites during the run of this exhibition. It's very contemporary, and I think we're used to seeing celebrities half naked and that intimacy. But I think in 1948 it was way too much information for the magazine editors, and you can see in the illustrated spread in that vitrine, their photographs, the black and white photographs, are a little more distant, much more elegant. And then these sort of very casual, very contemporary depictions of Picasso. So color was a failure, but the black and white was really worked in that case. Another story was he convinced the editors sort of the counterpoint to the winter resorts was the summer resorts. In Deauville in the north of France and Biarritz in the south of France. They're both beach resorts. In the north they had the horse racing. So you can see actually there's a range of cameras. He's using both the Rolly and the 35mm and his Speed Graphics camera for this. This picture here, which was actually another later attempt at fashion, a woman in a beautiful couture dress walking her dog, but he loves the moment right when this great worker comes up right next to her. Again, also in horse racing in Paris, you can see there's a real mix of people here. Very elegant woman, but then very average horseback, just as interested in the whole event. While he made Paris his home in the post-war years, he didn't do so many assignments about Paris. He really was traveling elsewhere and bringing the stories back to mostly American magazines, some French magazines, some foreign magazines as well, until one story for Holiday magazine about a dedicated issue to Paris, and he got his other Magnum colleagues to contribute different sort of stories about Paris to the issue, and it's sort of a love story about the romance of the city, and the text is by the Colette and great writers about different parts of Paris, and you can see some of his pictures were used. In fact, this picture of the Tour Eiffel was used on the cover image, and this picture too, I think, of the Place La Concorde was used. But again, really a very beautiful, I think, news documentary picture of Paris just after the rain. These very strong clouds crashing across really the heart of the city. This Rome story that he did, further emphasizes the kind of story he's interested in. Rome right after the war was really in shambles. You know, they were just figuring out the new democracy and new democratic elections, but that's not what he was interested in. He was interested in these beautiful women buying clothes and going out into parties and having a lot of fun. But that was also what the magazines wanted to print. They didn't want, you know, big stories of difficult, complicated political issues. If they were writing stories like that, one picture would suffice. But it wasn't big takeout stories of different countries, but more glossy, lighter, sort of human stories. Another great story he did in the 1949 with some other Magnum colleagues was Generation X, which was a term that he coined for young people who were born during the war, or born just before the war, who had survived as children, and really was very curious about Capa and his friends who had grown up in the 30s, in the very political, heady 30s in Paris mostly. What those kids, or what these kids now, sort of the same age as they were in the 30s, what they were thinking about, what were their dreams, what were their fears? You know, without this great fear of fascism heading over them, what did they want to do with their lives? So he really assigned his colleagues different countries to pick a young person, a boy and a girl from each, and really give them a set of very strong questions about their lives, their family life that they lived with, their schooling, what they wanted to do in the future, but also very personal ones about religion. Did they go to church? Politics? Did they even know who their elected official was? And also, if they were interested in having children and if they knew about birth control, which is, I mean, the whole project is really fascinating as a sort of mid-20th century point that I think is worth exploring in another exhibition. But these are his kids that he chose: a Parisian girl, a Norwegian boy, and a Norwegian girl, and a German boy for the project. And what's interesting also in the book that you produced, most of the photographs that chose to reproduce, certainly of the girl, the Parisian girl in black and white, because the text was sort of about her being a bit lost. She was orphaned during the war. She was a model, but she lived a sort of flighty life, but didn't really know where she was going. And so I find the color photographs really don't speak to that at all. They're very gay. She seems very smart. She's pretty serious in what she's focused on. But the black and white photographs, which were published by the magazines, really more reflect a kind of grayer life that her introducing was to. During World War II, we actually made friends with the great director and actor John Huston, and that was sort of the first of his great Hollywood friendships. He later, famously had a short affair with Peter Bergman that ended very amicably, actually. But he was very interested in film. He, I think, dreamed of to be a director when he was a young child in Budapest. I think that was sort of where he imagined himself going. But like with the fashion work, he really didn't work well on set. He didn't want people to know when to photograph. I don't think he certainly wanted to give the camera over to anyone. But he did find himself on the sets of these various films of his friends, or ones. He thought it was a lucrative deal for Magnum, the photo agency, to produce photographs of the film sets. And so you can see Orson Welles on the set in Morocco, a set in, I think in Malta of Single-Handed, Anna Magnani in Rome, Ingrid Bergman on the set of Viaggio in Italia. They're pretty wonderful photographs of life on the set. I mean, they're not the beautiful headshots that you would get on a gum card or would be used as headshots and given away, but really life on the set and what the actors' experience was in between shots. Here is Truman Capote and one of the actors on Beat the Devil. She's needle pointing during her off hours. Here, you know, Humphrey Bogart and Peter Lorre just having a cigarette, you know, between shots, which I think they're pretty spectacular moments there. In 1953, he writes to John Morris, his editor at Magnum now, and confidant, about the exact quote I'm going to try, but something about this period, this motley period of film sets and resorts is over. I want to get back to serious work. And I'm paraphrasing. But the point is, I think he's almost 40 years old. He's really thinking sort of the next stage of his life. He, in 1954, accepts an assignment to go to Japan. With the only caveat that he has to use Japanese film, but he's left to do whatever he wants to photograph. So he kind of wanders around, and really most of the photographs are pretty touristy, because I think there was a great language divide for him. And I think it was very challenging to photograph a culture that he had no relationship, when so much of his other work was about engaging with people. I mean, he would arrive and go to the bar and start meeting people. He would wander around with his friends. I mean, he was very connected with what was happening on the ground. He loved talking to people. So I think in Japan it was very a different kind of subject for him. But I think some of the best ones are of this essentially May Day, May 1st worker celebration. And you know, that's where his work started in the 1930s. He was photographing the workers' demonstrations on the street of Paris. He was photographing, you know, the socialist Republican side in Spain. And I think the photographs of the masses and sort of the faces of these people intently listening to the speeches being given, are sort of starting to get his juices going again for that kind of engaged work that he loved so much in the earlier years. And it was in Japan when he got a cable asking him to sort of make a detour of his trip through Japan and to take a flight to Indochina to cover for another life photographer whose family member had died and had to leave very quickly. But life really needed a photographer on the ground in case something happened. They needed pictures quickly. And Capa, I think, you know, debatable whether wanted to go or felt he should go, but really, I think it was a financial deal he couldn't refuse. I mean, I think working as a photographer, keeping his Magnum agency alive was very, very, very stressful, you know, from day one when it was founded in 1947. So much of this assignment was really, all of this work, all assignments, they were paid work. I mean, he always knew he would get money for these trips. He always knew they would be published. And that's the kind of concern that he had, and what his letters are absolutely peppered with is how to keep the agency going, how to keep work alive for his other colleagues. So he did go to Indochina, and we of course know what happened. Within days after arriving there, he stepped on the landmine and was killed. But so these are the last photographs that he made. He was obviously working both in black and white and color, but he's back with a 35mm camera, which was really the ideal camera for someone like Capa who wanted to follow action, because the Rolly camera, is not a great one for action. It's still kind of you have to be quite still, and I think the subject has to be still, whereas the 35 can really move around, which is what he was so good at doing. So he's back to his 35mm, and then this is a great sequence that he takes just of a simple group of peasants who are helping another peasant bring up their bicycle that had fallen off the road into the ditch. And there's so much happening in this sequence of four, but it sort of brings back his sort of cinematic interest, but also his profound interest in humanity, how people help each other, and how do people engage with each other. And then these also from literally his last days. I mean, these are the fields where he was shot, and I find where he died. And this one I think is quite a masterpiece of war in such a different way than, you know, the soldier on the battlefield. You know, you see these American soldiers on the road. What are they guarding? They're guarding a man with a flock of geese or ducks walking to the market on the, you know, miles down the road. Sort of this real absurdity of the situation that he's witnessing in Indochina, Vietnam. And Zoltz, the great designer, pointed out a really interesting fact about this picture just the other day as he was hanging the show and looking carefully at these pictures, and noticed that the black and white image of this was not only very similar, but exactly the same. And I had never thought that any of this color film had ever been published in black and white. That, you know, the editors of this period really kept black and white separate. It was no sort of printing a color picture in black and white, which is what we do all the time today. Quickly flip from black and white to color. But this is the one case that this image was printed on the cover of a magazine in 1964, so just 10 years after his death, and it was to advertise a retrospective exhibition of his work. And this color image was on the cover, but there were no color images inside, nor were there any color images in the retrospective. And it was very, you know, that's how retrospectives went of his work. It was always black and white. But I think when Cornell Capa was organizing a big book of about 1,000 of his best pictures in roughly 2000, late 90s. I think this picture came up as one of them that was one of his great pictures, and that he actually did print in black and white, but it was much after his death in the, as I said, almost 2000. So I thank Zoltz again for pointing that out to me, but it keeps research alive when everyone starts to notice things and gives information into this work. So, I mean, I could, in this vitrine, I think interesting, two magazines, both Time and Life, that print obituaries of his death are only using black and white. But this, I think, is a case probably where the color film just wasn't available. Again, the timeline didn't allow for the color to be printed. But you can see just after his, after his death, right away, the story is being written in black and white. And then this, 2 pages from quite a long report that was given to the Magnum photographers sort of annually. But in this one, I think in 1952, he talks about the state of magazines and what kind of stories they should be writing, etc. And the poignant moment is, while the magazines have enormous choice in filling up their black and white pages, they're constantly short of material for their ever-increasing color space. So still, he's very, we have to shoot far more color, blah, blah, blah. But I think he's, very sensitive to how the photographers are going to survive, and color has to be part of their work. And, color photography is now ubiquitous, and, every serious photographer is working in color. But news photography did not really accept color as a serious medium until very recently. I think really until, well, the New York Times, of course, wasn't printing color on the cover until, I don't remember the exact date, but I think it was 90s, the sort of early 90s, which is very new if you think about the history of color. And even, even if a lot of photographers, Magnum photographers, were photographing in color in the 50s, they didn't show that work later. In retrospectives and other books that they were curating. Color was really the realm of commercial photographers or advertising. It wasn't serious. And so, that I think added to not just the subjects that he was photographing, which were admittedly much lighter than his politically engaged work, but also it was just such a different presentation of even very similar work that was sort of ahead of its time. for the 50s, and then really until very quite recently. So it's, you see, this is not the only exhibition that's looking at color work from this earlier time. There seems to be a whole great interest in that early color, what it looked like and how did it function, that we're seeing today. So that's really the end of my tour. There's a documentary, a great documentary, about an hour and a half-ish, hour 20 minutes, in the next room over, and I think it's interesting because it was done in about 2002, and there's not a hint of color, because we hadn't looked at this work, and no one was talking about it in the same way. And then in the next room over, you have all of the letters translated, and then the audio interview, 1947, which is really exciting. So thank you for listening. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.